Hello all, this is the Owl. You know who I am, you know what I do. So let's jump right into the recap because...
It's about damn time!
And oh boy, do we have a lot to cover today. Young caver Rico and her android friend Reg headed down into the abyss, an impossibly deep and seemingly bottomless vault to find her mother and Reg's history. On the way, they teamed up with Nanachi, she of the cute fluffiness, sweet smell, and tragical history, and eventually ran into archvillain Bondrude, one of the superpowered sovereigns or white whistles, and his daughter Prushka. Okay, adopted daughter, you pedantic bastards. Prushka befriended the trio, but was eventually made into a cartridge by Bondrude, and, with the last of her will, transformed into a white whistle for Rico, which is required to get down below level 5. This permitted them access to layer 6, but not until they had successfully fought Bondrude to a standstill. It was all very epic, very dark, and very interesting. Not to mention extremely dense and occasionally confusing as balls. Today, we're going to take a look at the next arc of Maiden Abyss, which is where things get weird. Not bad weird, not necessarily good weird, but weird weird. Oh, and dark weird, but I guess that goes without saying. And occasionally pretty damn metal, but still weird. Because, my friends, it's time to sail off the edge of the map, and here there be monsters. Now, before we really get going, it's time to cover my feathery ass with a disclaimer. Layer 6 is very dense and rather abstract in places, even more so than the previous parts. I've read this several times and even gone through it with the wiki, but there are still likely going to be things that I get wrong. And it also throws rather a lot at you rather fast. So if you're going, huh, or what, chances are that it will make sense once you get in further. Or maybe not. It's also a bit slow going out of the gate, as there is a whole lot of world building for the 6th layer. See, this arc is structured a bit differently to the last one. It feels like Tsukushi might be taking a few notes from Ichiro Oda, in that it's put together very similarly to a One Piece arc, the Skypiea arc to be specific, which feels like it might well have at least loosely inspired part of this. What do I mean by a One Piece arc? Well, a One Piece arc has a metric ton of world building initially, combined with the gradual introduction of characters and setting up a mystery. Then you've usually got a filler battle, then a jump backwards in time to explain exactly what's going on, and then we get to the main event battle. And oh boy, is the main event here worth waiting for. Today we'll get through the first half of the arc, the world building and the setting up of mysteries, and next time we'll take a look at how it all shakes out and comes together as a whole. Is it as good as the stuff that came before? Is it a gigantic letdown? Is it a whole bunch of overcomplicated flippity-flu? We'll see. Now, there's 3 more things that I want to mention. Firstly, this is the part of the story where we start spending a lot of time with and learning about the so-called hollows. However, I know that hollow is probably the English colloquialization. The term used in Japan is narehate, which is derived from nararehate, which translates into a shadow of your former self. But I'll be using hollow going forward. Secondly, this is the arc that made me suspect that Tsukushi might be a big fan of classic Western horror, or at least 1970s and 1980s era horror comics. Of course, there's definitely a lot of Lovecraft in this part, but there are also some interesting similarities, some Nobuhiro Watsuki-style nods to what may well be Garth Ennis's amazing run on Hellblazer and Grant Morrison's Invisibles.
Nerd!
or perhaps I'm talking out of my ass. Keep an eye out, let me know what you think. Thirdly, and finally, this arc is just so dense and there's so much that I want to talk about outside of the primary narrative that I'm going to have to exclude a lot of stuff. Thus, I would strongly recommend that you check the full manga out for yourself. Just beware, there's rather a lot of nudity here. With that out of the way, it's time to enter the radiant abyss of Layer 6. Enjoy your stay. Volume 6 opens with our party standing at the altar of the absolute boundary, the entrance to Layer 6. I just want to draw your attention to how wonderfully this panel is constructed. The large vertical flare draws your eyes down to the tiny party dwarfed by the enormity of the almost alien structure around them. The anime, while certainly good, never really reaches this level of wow for me. I mean, I would hang this on my wall at home. It gives that very Lovecraftian feeling of being about to enter a space not meant for mankind. Behind this aperture, they find themselves in a circular chamber surrounded by water, which then suddenly starts descending. The party puts two and two together. This is why you need a white whistle to get down lower. The lift is a relic, and Rico accidentally activated it by rubbing Prushka. And yes, I'm calling the white whistle Prushka because the party does and because, well, you'll see. As they descend, we get a brilliant little picture showing us the route they followed, with all the major plot locations and the area below shrouded in darkness. Oh, and the party poops into Pontrud's altar. Okay, I'll never not be immature enough not to find that funny. A while later, they emerge into a chaotic landscape, the capital of the Unreturned, which appears to be a shattered city. Later on, this is all implied to be gold. And yeah, I'm going to be gushing over the art a fair bit in this review. Just look at that. The detail, the perspectives, the way the rings at the top left and the structures at the top and bottom almost form an arrow which draws your vision down to the tiny trio exiting the lift. Yeah, again, the anime adaptation of Made in Abyss is great, but not quite this great. They explore, and Rico marvels at the ancient, in places crystallized structures and ruins. But Nanachi interrupts, saying that she can detect life signs gathering around them with her abyssal sense. They need to keep moving. As they do, they wonder why coming down here is considered such a big deal. Well, besides the horrible mutative effects of the curse. Rico says she's looking forwards to meeting another white whistle, because Rico has a serious case of the dumb at times. Off in the distance, they spy something enormous, and Rico identifies it as something called a turbinid dragon, which is apparently off the charts dangerous, so they give the thing a wide berth. I just love the design of it. It's somewhere between a seahorse and something out of Stephen King's The Mist. Suddenly, the party sees a bright light, an immense discharge of energy bursting off skywards, far off into the ruins, and they find themselves scrambling for cover as globs of poisonous acidic liquid come raining down around them. Eventually, they find a safe place to rest and eat. And before they go to sleep, Nanachi draws a picture of the party for Rico. Later, Nanachi awakens, sensing that something is off. She turns and sees, eep, something has edited their picture, crossing Nanachi out and replacing Rico with a crude, inverted stick figure drawn in pitch black ink. That's some Blair Witch shit right there. Quick, make sure you don't lose your map. Everyone wakes up, and Rico finds her whistle gone. Nanachi realizes that this is worse than the others might suspect. as whoever or whatever infiltrated their camp did so without setting off her sense at all. She examines the defaced drawing. Oh, note how the artist even does a depth of field effect on the far left panel. That's friggin' quality, that is. According to Nanachi, the paint is a primitive substance made of fat, urine, and possibly iron. They attempt to follow a faint trail left by Prushka, and soon find two mutilated animal carcasses with their anuses sewn shut. Reg rips them open and finds them stuffed with hair, Nanachi's hair and Riko's hair specifically. Holy crap, this might actually be a Blair Witch. Starting to get pretty damn spooked, the party continues following the trail and ends up at what looks like a crude dwelling built into some sort of mountain. Nanachi is intrigued. I would be nervous. As they approach, it turns out that it's actually built into a ridiculously huge dead creature. Reg hears something faint, really far off, a distant muttering, and warns the party that they are being watched. Inside, they find an enormous collection of human bones and body parts, hung up like Sawyer family decorations. Bloody hell, forget the Blair Witch. Maybe there's a Bubba waiting down here. Hopefully not a camper. They suddenly emerge into an absolutely colossal chamber and find themselves looking down at not a room, not a house, but an entire village. The village of hollows, Iruburu. Wow, that's just, yeah, gushity gushity gush. See, this place is fascinating to me. It reminds me a lot of Sento Chihiro no Kamikakushi, a place of majesty, mystery, wonder, and incredible, omnipresent alien danger. And of course, it all ends up in what I consider to be probably the darkest stuff in the manga. Yes, even darker than that. And that. And that. Let's head on in. Immediately, three creatures approach them, or maybe they're watching them from a distance, I'm not quite sure. From right to left, we have Coolskin Wraith, Glory Hole Face, and Mushroom Centipede. Yeah, they've got their own names, but man, are those some weird-looking buggers. Remember them though, they'll be important later, and yes, that is a phrase you'll be hearing a lot. Something else approaches, and identifies itself as Majikaja. Riko asks if, you know what, I am just going to say he, if he is the one that took her whistle. Majikaja, I'm gonna fuck these names up so many times as we go, says that someone is doing the stone.
Phrasing?
And instructs them to follow as he scuttles off. Now, we learn later that Majikaja's weird biomechanical body is actually full of sacs. He is a bunch of gas. I guess you'd call him a smart fart. Riko is somewhat nonplussed as the smart fart starts climbing the staircase. What about the curse? Nanachi tells her that for some reason, inside this village, the curse does not seem to exist at all. Nanachi heads off eagerly, very curious about what indeed seems to be an entire society of hollows, but warns Reg that her abyssal sense isn't going to work in here either, and thus he will need to be vigilant. They find Prushka being chipped away at by a crab-like hollow and are immediately furious, but Majikaja explains that this is a refining process which will enhance Prushka's power further. Now, moving forward, I want you to keep some interesting little bits of subtext in mind, as these are two, well, senses that are both very Japanese but are also somewhat universal. The first is the general tone here, a bit different to the nightmarish stuff in previous layers. This one is more mysterious and alien. Definitely still threatening, but intriguing. The second is a fear that I touched on a bit in my Junji Ito review. The fear of impropriety, making some serious cultural faux pas, and then having things go terribly bad because of it. Except that here, the stakes may very well be life and death. We have a group of travelers entering an insanely alien village full of monsters, not knowing what's going on, not knowing how to speak the language, what to do, or how to behave. Again, this is a worry that I personally encountered in Japan a great deal, particularly when I was counseling foreign exchange students before they went abroad. And I get a sense that Tsukushi might have experienced something similar. Just take this next bit for example. The party enters a market, but have no idea what the unit of exchange is. Majikaja explains that it's a barter system, based on value. And this quickly intensifies when Riko finds something that appears to be a page from her mother's journal, but is screamed at by the frog-like creature running the place and is scolded by Majikaja. Even touching something that has value without permission is kind of a big deal here. Yikes. Getting anxious yet? Well, we haven't even started. Riko persists, wanting to trade for the page, but Majikaja reveals that, well, the thing of value would be her body parts, her eyes, her skin, her fat, and her organs are all really valuable here. See, as we'll learn, the denizens of this village have a often different understanding of flesh. If you've been paying attention thus far, you can probably guess why. Naturally, Riko declines and Majikaja immediately gives up. This place has an entire morality system based around this nebulous idea of value. And yes, this will be explored a lot going forward. The party explores some more, now even more on edge, all except for Riko, who, isn't the sharpest spoon in the drawer. We also learn that value has a distinct meaning here. It depends entirely on the individual what has value to them and how valuable it is. To some, it's a thing. To others, it's company or sensation. And to others, it's even more esoteric. For example, some like sticking tubes in themselves, and some like cutting apart living things. So this is somewhere between a libertarian utopia and hell. Confused? Hang in there, because this is going to get worse before it gets better, and the only way out is through. We also learn a little bit more about the Hollows, and okay, I am going to do my best analyzing this stuff, but holy crap is it both dense and vague. Apparently, the Hollow forms are created from desire, and Kajimaja marvels at Nanachi, who he says must have had a very strong desire protecting her, causing Nanachi to think back wistfully on Mitty. Oh yeah, and for some reason Kappa Blah Blah and the other Hollows apparently can never leave Iruburu. Again, we'll learn more about this later. Oh, and we meet Ma, who I predict is going to be the meme me character of the series, leading to our first taste of just how dangerous this village actually is. C. Riko leaves Mania to play with Ma, but as the other Hollows swarm around, Riko finds herself thrust away, and to her horror, Ma accidentally squeezes Mania too hard, causing one of its eyes to pop out and its intestines to prolapse out of its anus. Yeah, if you've ever had a pet, or worse, a small child, suddenly get swarmed by cuteness-aggressive strangers, is this fear going to strike home for you here? Nanachi seems able to fix Mania up, as Ma looks on, worried and apologetic for what seems to have been an accident. But Majikaja approaches Riko, concerned at her evident distress. He asks her what Mania's value was, and, without thinking, Riko causes a terrible misunderstanding to occur. She declares that Mania is unbelievably valuable to her, forgetting what she just learned about the village's morality system being entirely based around value. Majikaja announces that something called a balancing will take place, and before Riko can say anything, Ma begins fleeing in terror as some bizarre black shadowy thing rises up around it, ripping into its body and removing dozens of, holy crap, stuffed animals, which the nearby hollows shred as Ma screams in anguish. Nanachi holds her face, fucking traumatized by all of this, and yeah, it's pretty damn traumatic. Riko begs them to stop, but Majikaja tells her that once the balancing has begun, it can't be stopped. Then, in a suddenly threatening panel, asks Riko if maybe she overstated the value of mania. Eep. The party looks on in abject horror as, now hollowed out of its stuffed animals, Ma is partially flayed by the shadowy creature. Yup. If what you own isn't enough to make up for the shortfall, your body is used to cover the debt. Now, this next bit is a little unclear. It appears that some of Ma's bits are somehow transformed into a coin, which is given to Riko in lieu of compensation. She accepts, feeling insanely guilty about, well, getting someone horribly tortured for what was likely an accident. But as he leaves, Majikaja, now shortened to Kaja, says that this worked out rather well for her. The coin will buy whatever she wants in Iruburu, and after invoking the balancing so casually, it's unlikely that anyone is going to mess with her again. The party eventually manages to communicate sufficiently with the other hollows, or I guess you'd call them Iruburuans, to find a place to eat and rest. Is that design familiar to anyone else? I wonder if this is a reference to something. Anyway, the party find food and, yeah, what I'd probably describe as an invitation to constipation. Don't use that. Oh, of course Riko tries the food and comes down with a case of the heinous. Reg and Anachi leave her to her poopy fun times and go out looking for supplies, when they see the marketplace is in an uproar and suddenly a mighty impact is felt. They ask Kaja just what the hell that was, and he says that it was probably Faputa. Finally, you'll soon meet my absolute favorite character in the series and my editing nightmares for the past fortnight. Princess of the Hollows, the immortal Faputa, has arrived. And yeah, any character that makes their entrance riding a big daddy, you just know they mean business. As she approaches Reg, we see the first thing that makes her just fascinating. The ability to go from adorable to insanely scary in an instant. How the hell to even describe Faputa's design? She's a tarantula, bush baby, fennec, QB, a Fenta Q baby. Yeah, I got nothing. Faputa approaches Reg and immediately goes from being ominous to just being concerned and mildly affectionate. And yeah, that fucking bikini is the problem area, as, let's just say, it tends to cover progressively less and less the more you see this character, and bloody fails to cover anything half the time. So, if you see big white blocks on some images, well, I'm not after any trouble from the YouTube police. Faputa is concerned over the damage to Reg, and he in turn notices that she's beautiful? Well, each to their own, I guess. And Reg suddenly has a flashback. There must be some kind of history between these two. Now, note that Faputa also says sosu a lot, which I'm guessing is some kind of minimal response, much in the way you'd hear datara in older Japanese, or we'd say yeah or Faputa turns to see the entirety of Iruburu staring at her, which she does not like. So she does, yeah, I have no idea, and leaves with Reg. Back in Iruburu, Kaja explains a bit more about how things work. The residents are essentially trapped here, and we get our first intimation that the village might be sentient. It's apparently able to read the desire of the soul, so a value-based society where everything essentially comes down to desire. How Clive Barker of you, Tsukushi. Kaja asks Nanachi what she values, and naturally she mentions Mitty, who it appears that Kaja also somehow knows. What? Elsewhere, we see Faputa and Reg together. He's nonplussed at her interest and evident affection, especially as she constantly refers to him as her Reg and seems annoyed that he doesn't seem to remember her. She inspects him in an oddly canine/vulpine way, noting his missing hand and the wound Bondrewd left when he got impaled. Reg tries to stop her, but she easily overpowers him and pins him to the wall with her extra arms, which, considering how ridiculously strong Reg is, that's worrying. She continues sniffing at him and things nearly get, well, sexual. No, I'm not showing that on YouTube. But Reg struggles free and says what you've hopefully also been wondering. Reg was the name Rico gave him back in North. But Faputa tells him that no, she also knows him as Reg. Huh? He is now getting pretty nervous and prepares to leave, as Faputa becomes increasingly agitated, asking if he plans to instead live with Rico, knowing that she'll die long before he does. And this panel, yeah, her design is just so interesting to me. The huge eyes and not drawing the mouth somehow give both the impression of vulnerability and intimidation. Yeah, cute but threatening. As we get to know her better, you'll see how Faputa, in a way, sort of encompasses this entire manga. Reg leaves Faputa somewhat distraught. As he does, he acknowledges that she's both beautiful and an immortal princess, wondering what sort of relationship they shared in his long-forgotten past. As Volume 6 draws to a close, we see that things are weird back in North. Kids are starting to get ill and die on their birthday, and we also get to see the Orth tradition of scattering the ashes of the dead over the abyss, where the ashes apparently metamorphose into the special flowers. Down at the bottom, Reg looks up, and I'm not sure if this is a vision or reality, but thousands of petals drift down from above, as well as the names of the deceased, and final spreads like this. This is how you become a sensation. Volume 6 starts back at the, well, let's say Monster Hotel. Rico is feeling a bit better. The crap attack seems to be over, but she's starting to worry, as neither of her friends have returned. She tries calling, but yeah, as the suddenly stark and sketchy art indicates, the village is starting to take on a much more threatening tone than before. It's always interesting to me how Tsukushi uses this dramatic shift in visual style to indicate that things are going bad. Rico heads out, but finds that she can't communicate with any of the hollows due to the language barrier, and after being herded into an alley, she's suddenly attacked and things get a little hentai. Ugh, why Tsukushi, you dirty old bugger? Looks like Kaja was full of hot air, near, as she's swarmed and attacked by a group of hollows, losing her helmet, and things very nearly get rather ugly, when she's suddenly saved by, what the hell is going on? That's Ma, the thing we saw tortured and flayed earlier for accidentally smooshing Mania. Suddenly, they hear the same odd sound as they heard before the balancing occurred, and the shadowy creature rises up around them. But Rico and Ma flee. I'm guessing that the hollows that attacked them got balanced, but as far as I know, this is never explained. Rico says that she's even more confused now. Well, that makes two of us. Regardless, the pair strike off to look for the other two, and is it just me or does Ma have bizarrely mad cake? Seriously, this character, all the memes. Calling it now. We then switch back to Reg, who's now horribly lost after giving Princess Faputa the slip. He's also being pursued relentlessly by the ridiculously huge turbinid dragon we saw earlier. And we also finally get a good idea of just how massive this critter is. Oh, and it's got the same ability our old friend the Orb Piercer had, in that it seems to be able to predict the future, giving Reg a pretty hard time. Yeah, layer 6 is a hell of a lot more dangerous than the layers above. I really hope we get to fight some of these buggers in the game. Reg attempts to battle the dragon, but finds that he's completely overwhelmed by it. It's ridiculously strong and fast, and its limbs are capable of easily ripping his armor. As he backs off, the thing pukes up a bunch of crap and spits it at him, knocking him flying. Now, this is interesting, as both the head and the beak, as well as the offensive vomiting, remind me quite a lot of an actual creature, the turkey vulture. This thing, when threatened, can project a jet of horrible carrion vomit up to 10 feet. And I wonder if Tsukushi knew about this creature when he made the dragons. Once again, I'm probably talking out of my backside, but it's still interesting. Reg is saved from his fall by the Big Daddy creature we saw earlier, who it turns out can actually talk. This robot thing warns Reg that some sort of confrontation is coming, implying that both Faputa and the village are very, very dangerous, because of course they are. We then cut to Nanachi and... wait, what? That's Mitty. Remember when I said this arc was confusing as balls at times? But it seems that there's definitely something sinister about the village. The Big Daddy thing and Reg continue to talk as it uses a weapon oddly similar to his incinerator to blast back a whole bunch of dangerous-looking creatures converging on them. The robot tells Reg that this is because there are no beast deterrents out here. Yeah, those Blair Witch things we saw earlier, that was actually Faputa's ritual to protect them from the monsters down here. The robot also gives us a few hints towards what it and Reg are, and why they are so weirdly similar. Apparently, they are both constructs called interference units. One is placed in each layer to gather information. The whys, the whos, and the wherefores aren't clear, and it's not sure exactly what Reg is or why he lost his memory. But it does confirm that there is indeed a history between Reg and Faputa, and that she's extremely upset that he does not remember her. Yeah, this is the point in the story where the mysteries and what moments begin to compound, piling up so much that even looking around the internet, a lot of people are pretty damn lost themselves, which might be why this arc is kind of divisive. Fortunately, some of this will be explained later. Some of this. We switch back to Rico and Ma, who are trying the local cuisine at a restaurant. Rico finds something she likes, but of course it turns out to be testicle. I have questions. And Rico is astonished to find that the cook speaks English, or I guess whatever common they speak in North. Huh. She tells Rico that a handful of the hollows do indeed speak English, pointing out, oh, this dude. Yeah, this dude. That's Wazukian. We learn that Wazukyan and presumably the other two we saw earlier, remember Glory Hole Face and Mushroom Centipede, are the three so-called sages, the founders of Iruburu. Riko, initially nervous, tries talking to him but finds him both cryptic and remarkably chill, and as he leaves, he gives her what I'm guessing is a high five. She also spends some time learning the Iruburuan language, and I hope you're paying attention here, but Tsukushi hides a pretty huge reveal in this little side chapter, with the cook telling Riko that in her language, Iruburu translates roughly as village, cradle, and mother. As with so many things here, remember this one for later. Trust me on this. Village, cradle, and mother. The innkeeper doesn't know where the other party members are, but suggests that Riko starts searching at a mysterious dark place at the edge of the village called Dogupu, or Dogu Upu, sort of an abyss within the abyss. The hollows can't go there, as it triggers some kind of powerful, instinctive fear response. Yes, insert elephant graveyard joke here. Riko and Ma head down and find a sea of, well, this is almost certainly Tsukushi's riff on a Shoggoth. Yeah, you people who didn't agree with me saying Lovecraftian horror, pay attention please. And she also guesses that this is the black shadowy creature that handles the balancing. Naturally, Ma is freaking out. Riko finds an oozy butthole tunnel, and because Riko be Riko, climbs inside, crawls through and finds, what the hell? A haggard but human-looking woman, seemingly connected to the Shoggoth. Oh man, meet Fueko. There's a lot to unpack here. Riko approaches Vueko. She's quite friendly, remarking that it has been a very long time since she talked to another. Vueko offers to help Riko and her friends, but explains that she's imprisoned here. But Riko could easily free her. Riko, demonstrating probably for the first time in a good long while that she is actually capable of a bit of critical thinking, is hesitant, asking why Vueko is a prisoner here. She says what you've probably been guessing all along: the village hides a dark secret, and its origins, oh boy. And speaking of oh boy, Vueko is another pain in my feathery tush. See, she's completely starkers, boobs and all. So yeah, just to be safe, I'm going to be sticking a big white blob over any naughty bits. If you want to see naughty bits, buy the manga. Just watch out because you basically see everyone's naughty bits. Tsukushi, you horny bastard. Vueko continues, giving us, well, more cryptic hints. Something bad happened. Vueko was involved somehow, and whatever she did resulted in her being punished and sealed up down here. Riko, naturally, ends up freeing Vueko, and Riko and Ma help the very weak, very slimy, and very naked Vueko up to the surface. After they find some clothes for her, thank you so much, she leads Riko to an oddly ornate house and says that one of her friends should be inside. She also tells Riko that the person she's with, Belaf, is another of the three sages, but warns Riko that Belaf cannot be allowed to see her. So Riko heads in with Ma and finds a lot of Mitty-ish hollows. And soon, Nanachi, sleeping peacefully with something that, yeah, does look a hell of a lot like Mitty. She's startled when Kaja appears, seemingly trying to warn her, but they are interrupted when Belaf himself appears. Wait, hang on, that's frigging Triskel from Hellblazer. An odd coincidence. Also, those aren't eyes, those are mouths. Ugh. That's actually very similar to another comic from that era. I wonder if Tsukushi might have read the same classic horror comics that I did as a kid. Probably not, but it's still an interesting resemblance. Kaja explains that he brought Nanachi along, and she was completely overjoyed when she saw the inexplicably resurrected Mitty, only to realize that Mitty is basically Belaf's food supply due to her ability to endlessly regenerate. Nanachi sold herself to Belaf in exchange for him no longer feeding on Mitty anymore, and she is apparently now anesthetized. For what purpose, we don't know, but let's face it, she's probably his snack. Riko asks Belaf how she can get her friend back, and Belaf explains, A long time ago, Bondrud visited the village and brought Mitty with him for some reason. Belaf tried to buy Mitty, but Bondrud refused no matter what Belaf offered. So yeah, get ready for more what? Belaf, who used to have a much more powerful, much more centipede-like form, sacrificed most of his body in some sort of deal with the village, okay, to essentially have it create a clone of Mitty for him. Riko and Belaf haggle, but he won't go lower than half of Riko's nails, all of her equipment. Well, I guess she never uses frigging Blaze Reap anyway, as well as her choice of her legs, her eyes, or half of her organs. Riko was about to agree as long as he makes it painless, but Kaja stops her, warning her that, seemingly, if any deal of this nature is struck in the village, then terrible consequences will follow. A groggy Nanachi wakes up to tell her not to make the deal and to just leave without her. Oh, and then Vueko walks in and Riko immediately outs her identity to Kaja. Riko! But before anything else can happen, something impacts the side of the building. Hell yeah, it's time for what I'd probably describe as the filler battle. Again, this arc is structured very similarly to a One Piece arc. Let's do this. Outside, the pair see a leviathan monster that looks like, how the hell would you even describe this thing? An inside-out octopus swallowed by a jellyfish. Maybe. Anyway, the thing is approaching the village while the hollows battle it. Apparently, this is called the luring. As the villagers can't leave Iruburu, they sometimes lure creatures in. Riko remarks that the hollows are getting pantsed, and Vueko says that they might have lured a bit of a nasty one this time. Riko rushes off, as the creature appears to be inbound on the part of the village where Prushka, her whistle, is being refined. They are able to retrieve the now completed whistle, and as they flee, they are joined shortly after by Kaja, who explains that the monster is a vicious bugger that the hollows have nearly beaten before, but since then it got away, got wise, and has now acquired a taste for the hollows. Oh dear. So it's basically the Maiden Abyss equivalent of a mad elephant. The gargantuan creature heads for the market, but it's suddenly confronted by, oh hey, it's Glory Hole Face, who we learn is Juro Imo, the third sage. He may be a nod to the Count from Berserk, looking at his design. Juro Imo excretes a penis sword from its face vagina. Thank you so much, Tsukushi, for making me say that out loud. Yeah, this manga is bonkers, and the two have a protracted fight through the village streets. Watching from a distance, Riko is startled by the restaurant owner, who we finally learn is named Mugi, who brought other villagers out in heavy gear, but they mostly just get eaten. Vueko explains that, and I'm 90% sure I'm getting this right, that they usually rely on the Shoggoth creature from Dokupu to carry out a balancing on monsters that approach, but for some reason it's not showing up. Riko tries to analyze the creature and, based on her knowledge of the Abyss and its monsters, formulates a plan, as the powerful Juro Imo is finally overwhelmed and the monster starts heading towards the market. Riko and Kaja are ready to go. Riding Kaja like a damn jet bike, they tear off with the creature in hot pursuit, narrowly avoiding its attacks and leading it towards a wall of reflective mist that Rico spotted earlier, causing the thing to balk at its own reflection, and then get caught in a massive thermal updraft, pinning it in the air, immobilizing it, and giving the hollows an opening to snare it and swarm onto it to attack, apparently killing it. As the hollows tear into the monster, Rico explains to Mugi that she guessed that it was pretty powerful, an apex predator, and thus would be very territorial. Seeing its reflection would make it react as if another creature of its type was attacking. Rico also explains that, in a rare flash of cleverness, she thought that if she helped kill the monster, the village might owe her a favor, maybe helping her retrieve Nanachi. Well done, Rico. That's actually pretty damn smart. We see the seemingly dead creature's body begin to seethe, and then suddenly explode outwards, attacking all the hollows nearby. Ma saves Rico, and as the monster pulls him away, tosses Mania back to her. Rico screams in anguish as Ma begins to be devoured, but suddenly hears a familiar voice. It's Prushka, who tells Rico to blow her.
Phrasing.
She does, and something like a bolt from the heavens smashes down into the monster. Reg has landed, doing a superhero pose. Oh hell yeah. As he prepares to battle the beast, Reg explains that he was summoned when Rico blew the whistle. Remember, the whistles can activate relics, meaning that Prushka can activate and summon Reg no matter where he is. That's so bloody useful. Reg is on the attack, blasting through the creature's tentacles, but by the time he reaches the main body, there's only a shell remaining. Womp womp. Wazukyan emerges from the village, still at maximum chill. He explains that, okay, get this. The monster was in fact a nest of creatures. The largest creature, the queen, was presumably killed by Rico's plan, and the tentacles that lashed out were the males trying to escape. So it's kind of like the rat hive from Borderlands. That's really interesting. Rico asks Wazukyan if he can help her get Nanachi back from Belaf, and their discussion ends on an ambiguous note. A bit later, we see what he told Rico. Mitty is of immense value to Belaf, as he sacrificed a big chunk of his body to get her, which in turn meant that for Nanachi to get her back, Nanachi had to sell herself to Belaf. Thus, Nanachi won't be retrieved without something of incredible value. Reg thinks back and realizes that they may have an option here, and we get our first hints as to what's coming. The massive confrontation building up like an inevitable sneeze. Faputa, who was previously described as the embodiment of value. If they could get a hold of any part of her, it might be enough to free Nanachi. Reg decides to go and talk to Faputa, despite his nervousness around the mercurial hollow princess in exile, leaving an exhausted Rico with Vueko. As Reg departs, we see a brief exchange between him and I'm guessing Vueko. He wants to know exactly what the hell Faputa is. Vueko describes her as the thing they both all desire and all fear the most. We also get our first look at the history of the village and some big hints as to some of the mysteries of the place and possibly the abyss itself. A very long time ago, Vueko, Belaf, Wazukyan, and other explorers ventured into the abyss in search of something. They eventually found themselves in the 6th layer, in a golden city infested with monsters. They were able to descend, thanks to a hollow they found, which for some reason had a white whistle. Is it just me, or does that thing look like Lockjaw from the Inhumans? And they were able to get the lift moving with it. Using the lift, they tried to escape back to the surface, and if you've been paying attention, you could probably guess why this was a really bad idea. Yup, anyone who tried to go back up got hit by the curse and ended up mitied. Wazukyan suggested that, as they couldn't leave, they formed their own settlement down in the city. Then, a lot of stuff happened, which you'll have to wait for part 5 to learn about. Or, buy the manga. Trust me, I've skipped over a hell of a lot here. Back in the present, Fueko reveals that she was one of the original 3 sages, the founders of the village, along with Wazukyan and Belaf. But due to events in the past, she was punished and sealed away. If the other sages learn that she's loose, it would go really badly for her. As the volume draws to a close, we get a bit of an exposition dump. Or I guess, rather the exposition equivalent of an amuse-bouche, as Fueko explains a bit about faputa, but also warns Riko that this is a very dark secret. We only get flickers of information at this point. Wazukyan nearly pooped himself when he saw Reg, as Reg is apparently a true resident of the Golden City, and faputa has some connection to someone called Irumyui. Holy crap, Irumyui, just you wait. The final part of the volume ends on, well, let's take a look, because this scene is quite something. Reg finds faputa, who seems calm again, and she agrees to give Reg a part of her body if he agrees to fulfill his promise to her. He is understandably reluctant, as he has no idea what he could possibly have promised her, and asks her for more information first. But she decides to go on ahead regardless. Crikey fucking Moses! Ripping off her arm and one of her ears and presenting them to Reg before revealing the promise. He apparently promised her that he would help her fully eradicate Iruburu. And that's how you do a cliffhanger. Yep, we'll be ending here today. I will say that this is probably the boring part of the arc. Oh, don't you worry. Things go absolutely crikey nuts bananas in the next part. But it's still really damn good, really dark, incredibly creative, and sets up a ton of interesting mysteries. Oh yeah, and the art is as mind-blowing as always. If you feel like you're a bit lost at sea right now, don't worry. About 65% of this is explained in the second half of this arc. And that's also where we get back to the really dark stuff. At least as dark as the Bondrewd arc, yes, cartridges and all, as well as what may be one of the most epic battles in manga history. I can promise you that, at least, you've never seen anything quite like this. But you'll have to wait and see. Well, take care, my friends, and I'll see you next time. This is the Owl, signing off.